like to welcome you each to the celebration of life of Bruce Ivey. Just a week before Bruce passed away, I stopped by and I took enchiladas. Now, I didn't make the enchiladas, but yet I stopped by Bruce and we just reminisced. We just reminisced just a little bit. Now, Cindy and I arrived at PUC the same year as Bruce and Janet. And so when you arrive the same time and your kids are the same age, what happens is you connect. And so I remember distinctly going on a trip with Bruce. Now, Cindy's and my idea of camping is the Comfort Inn. And so what happened was we were going to go on a trip. And so what happened was this trip was to Lassen. It was 28 years ago. And so what happened was I called Bruce up and I said, Bruce, could I be your tent mate? Now, Bruce is used to having Janet. And so he said, sure, Jeff, no problem. And so for 4 nights, I was Bruce's tent mate. And I can still remember that. So here Bruce and I were chatting just a little short time ago. And the smile on Bruce's face was much similar to this particular smile that you see right here. And Bruce was the kind of man that I call a gentle giant. Bruce was a prince. And I enjoyed Bruce's friendship for many, many years, for 30 years. And so when Bruce started a hiking thing for 19 years, I decided I wanted to be part of that. And so what we did is Cindy and I, we would go hiking with Janet and Bruce. And so we decided that whenever they would go hiking to Tahoe, we would meet down here at the shopping center at 7 o'clock on Sabbath morning, and we would drive to Tahoe. Now, what was special about this was the fact that Bruce would always lead, and Janet would always follow, and we would always follow Bruce. And Bruce would always know where we were going to go. And sometimes we'd go to Echo Summit. Sometimes we'd go to Donner Pass. And I can still remember one day where it had snowed and there was like 4 feet of fresh powder. And there was a hike, and if ever you've been to Donner Pass and you park and you go up some pretty steep places, and you go to Peter Grubb's cabin, and you have your picnic, and you come on back, and it's pretty rigorous. It's pretty rigorous. But you got to know where you're going to go. But you got to follow Bruce. And so we just sat and we reminisced about those stories. And so this year I decided I was going to go with Cindy on a hike to Tahoe. Just Cindy and I. And so we went to Tahoe, and we went to Emerald Bay. 5 feet of snow, no problem. So we went, and there was stakes out, and so there were all the markers. And so we went on a beautiful hike. We could see all the markers that told us exactly where to go. And so we thought, well, this is perfect. This is perfect. But the next day we went back to the same place, but they took all the markers away. And I said, how hard can this be? Tahoe. We were all alone. There was nobody there. And so we went for a 6-mile hike, just Cindy and I. Tahoe's beautiful. We came back, and we were coming back, and we looked at each other. And we were kind of lost. I looked at Cindy, she looked at me, and I thought to myself, this would never have happened to Bruce Ivey. Bruce always knew his way home. When you followed Bruce Ivey, you would always know the way home. One of these days soon, we each are going to see Bruce Ivey when we each go.
Before Dr. Ivey passed, he expressed his interest in us reading together John 14, 1 through 4. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to try. Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, ye may be also. You know where I'm going, and you know why. Let's bow our heads. Father God, we're here today to remember Dr. Bruce Ivey, a very precious friend. Be with us, strengthen us, just help us. We love you so much.
I'm glad to see so many people here. Thank you for coming. This is really nice. So I'm supposed to tell the story of my dad's life in about 5 minutes. It started in 1946 when he was born in Owasso, Michigan. He grew up on a 240-acre farm with his parents, Forrest and Lorena, and his two older sisters, Margaret and Josephine. I always knew them as Peggy and Joe. They grew dairy cows and crops. Bruce always liked the animals. He helped care for them and milk them. They did not have a horse, so the kids had to make do riding on the cows. That continued until one day, Fanny, who was normally gentle, dumped Bruce onto a pile of rocks behind the barn and broke his collarbone. Shortly after that, a horse was added to the farm. My dad was always ready to build things or repair things as needed, and he got his mechanical skills helping out on the farm, helping his father. Once when he was young, he disassembled some tricycles that he and his sisters had outgrown, and used the parts to build a new vehicle. Like his father, he learned to play trumpet well. He enjoyed playing board games and collecting jokes and going on fishing trips. For high school, he went to Cedar Lake Academy, where he met my mom, Janet. He excelled in mathematics, he was yearbook editor, and he played first chair trumpet in the school band. He went to college at Andrews University. He played trumpet in that band too, and he went to jazz concerts with Janet. While he was at Andrews, he got a tour of a nearby computer facility, and he recognized that there was something exciting afoot there, something interesting, and that started a lifelong interest in computers. Bruce and Janet were married in 1968 at the end of college. For their honeymoon, they went on a canoe trip in Canada. They moved to Kansas, and Bruce taught math and science at Enterprise Academy. While he was there, he also earned his pilot's license. He studied at the shortest airstrip in Kansas. It was at a nearby farmer's field. Sometimes he had to do a low pass to chase the sheep off the runway before landing. After 3 years in Kansas, they moved to Bozeman, Montana. He taught math and science at Mount Ellis Academy there, and he did that for 13 years. He was an active faculty member. He helped with yearbook photography. He played trumpet in the Academy band. He led backpacking trips with students. My parents invited students over for Vespers on Friday nights, and board games on the weekends. They made lifelong friends there at Mount Ellis. Montana was a good place for their outdoor pursuits. They enjoyed hiking in the mountains, canoeing down the rivers, downhill skiing, cross-country skiing. They bought a pickup camper, and they drove it to Alaska. They helped friends build a log cabin in the mountains, chopping down trees, notching and stacking them up. My brother Brad and I were born in Bozeman, and so soon these outdoor trips were family affairs. I remember a lot of weekends spent in Yellowstone National Park, enjoying nature. Bruce went back to school when he was in Bozeman. He went to Montana State University. He earned 2 masters and a doctorate of education. While he was there, he took a class from John Ament, and that started a lifelong partnership. In the late 70s, they built computer simulations of these various complex systems to help improve public policy. They built simulations of electricity grids, water resource management, grazing land management simulators, and home energy conservation simulators. The idea was that they would use these simulations to help teach voters and politicians more about how the complex systems interact with each other so that we get better policy. In the 80s, they started working on computer-based chemistry lab equipment, and that was something they continued working on for the next 30 years. In 1992, both my parents took jobs at Pacific Union College. My dad taught computer science, math, physics, and astronomy. He was chair of the CSMP department for a while. He enjoyed opening the observatory to community members on Friday nights so they could go stare at the stars. He was active in the church. He helped with the audio on Sabbath morning services. And he was a regular at the Paul and Hall Sabbath School where he enjoyed the theological and intellectual discussions. California, of course, has great opportunities for new outdoor adventures. He enjoyed hiking at the beach, backpacking at Trinity Alps and Point Reyes, and hiking and mountain biking right here behind the college on the PUC forest. They traded in their cross-country skis for snowshoes, which are better suited for the kind of snow that we have here, and they led many snowshoe trips up in Tahoe. He retired after 21 years at PUC. He stayed active in the campus as an emeritus professor, and he kept working with John on microlab. In their retirement, my parents found time to travel. They went to Russia and Spain and Hawaii. They bought another pickup camper and they drove it to Alaska as well. They got to see bears fishing for salmon in the rivers there. Many Mondays found them with their grandchildren, Alex and Eric, going to museums or zoos or hiking or just having fun at home. They enjoyed jazz concerts, local plays, movies. And they started leading group hikes through the church and through the land trust in Mesa County. They enjoyed sharing their love of nature with others. So even in his retirement, Bruce was never lacking for things to do. And that brings us to the end of the story. I'm really proud that my dad was able to touch so many lives. And I'm glad that he led a good life, and that it was well lived.
I have the privilege of sharing some information and some memories that I have and others from Bruce's life around the office here at PUC. In 1992, Bruce began making positive and lasting impact on the computer science and math physics department. During his tenure at PUC, he taught classes in all three areas: computer science, math, physics, including astronomy, and then eventually took his turn as department chair. But his impact was not limited to just our department. He served as a WASC planning committee member, a long-term editor of the faculty handbook, chair of CCOM, our curriculum committee, and two-time vice chair of the academic senate. As a result of his dedication to the mission of the college and his ongoing support of the department, in 2013 he was appointed Professor Emeritus of Computer Science and Physics. Since then, he continued to maintain office hours, was a valuable resource for the department, and a mentor to me personally. I first met Dr. Ivey in 2003. Now I say Dr. Ivey because I couldn't bring myself to call him Bruce for the first 2 years. Now that doesn't say anything about him. It says more about me and probably my southern upbringing. The college at the time had an open position for a physics professor, and Bruce was the department chair. He was the first person I met at PUC. During my interview, I quickly realized that the department faculty had achieved a high level of collegiality and created a family-like atmosphere within the office. Bruce's leadership and sense of humor was an integral part in maintaining that atmosphere. In fact, my wife and I, and especially my children, still have fond memories of the departmental Christmas parties hosted at the Ivey's home. It didn't take long for me to get to know Bruce in my first year at PUC. We shared a love of astronomy. One day we hosted a public viewing outside the library during a partial solar eclipse. I stood by and watched as Bruce's eyes lit up. He began to invite passing students to look through our telescope. His enthusiasm during that event was infectious. As he explained what they were observing, he brought smiles to their faces as well as mine. To this day, I continue to use very well-prepared materials that he had developed for the introduction of astronomy course. Well, but speaking of classes, Bruce's students have often expressed to me their appreciation of him as their professor. One strange but notable anecdote I can share with you is one day Bruce caught an astronomy student cheating during an exam. The student later confided in me that receiving a 0 on the exam was less of a punishment than the knowledge that his actions had caused Dr. Ivey to have feelings of disappointment. What a wonderful example of compassionate, effective teaching. In preparation for today, I solicited comments from former colleagues. The memories came in, but it became very clear to me that there was an overwhelming consensus. His office life was filled with his humor, smiles, and laughter, while fulfilling the mission of the college through his masterful teaching and thoughtful leadership.
Well, I have the privilege this afternoon of stirring up warm memories of Bruce doing something he absolutely loved, was completely in his DNA, and you know what it is because almost all of the pictures that we've seen are of Bruce being in the outdoors. I mean, just count up all the things that we've seen. He's been fishing, he's been kayaking, he's been canoeing, he's been backpacking, he's been hiking, and I did not know that he was into alpine sledding. He was... It was just part of who he was. And what does it say that even when the boys were in diapers, that these guys went camping? That tells you either great courage or an irresistible pull of the outdoors. I did most of my experience with Bruce in the outdoors, hiking and backpacking. And I'm not sure how many people could out-hike Bruce. Now, I never heard Bruce brag, not really, but the closest he came was telling about when he taught at Mount Ellis Academy. I hope he had white hair at that time too, because he would kind of talk about how he could beat those young academy whippersnapper boys, right? On the competitive steep climb on the hill to the top behind the campus, and he could beat those boys up there. And I hear that Janet was no slouch either at that, is what I hear. But we never knew whether Bruce could out-hike us because he never tried to out-hike us. Whenever I backpacked with Bruce and Janet, Bruce was literally never more than 12 paces away from Janet. Whether Janet was in the front, the middle, or the back of the pack. And those of us who went on land trust hikes or church group hikes with Bruce and Janet, we never found out either. Because Bruce and Janet were like highly trained sheep herding dogs on those trips. One of them in the front, one of them in the back, and maybe they'd switch out to make sure the group wasn't hiking too slow or too fast, and certainly no hiker left behind. Before they went on those group hikes, they always hiked the trail ahead of time. So you always felt like you were in good hands. And I cannot think of a single hike I ever went with them, except for maybe snowshoeing, where they did not point out some sort of flower. And if they were not sure which flower it was, Bruce would talk to Janet, and Janet would consult with Bruce, and they'd talk this language of flower identification, whatever that is, and they'd come up with something. I remember one time at the top of the Palisades with a group where they found a bunch of mission bells. And to hear, I remember Bruce's voice, he says, "Come look, you've got to come look." At mission bells, the joy was infectious about flowers. I now know what mission bells are, for example. See, that was the thing about hiking with Bruce, is that you always seem to learn something with him. I remember going on a hike with him once where he decided he was going to also try to identify trees. And he had this little chart with him, right? I think the chart was laminated even. And so there's fir, and there was spruce, and there was pine, and what kind of fir and spruce and pine. And I learned that it depended on the needles, whether the needles were flat or round. And yet I never knew that needles could be flat or round. Or he'd had you smell the bark. And if it were sweet, it was sugar pine. Bruce could get people to smell tree bark. When you were with Bruce out there, you just noticed more of the world. Bruce was so handy to have around in multiple other ways. He was a model of competence and calm in the outdoors. I remember a time when Bruce, Janet, Elaine, and I were backpacking on the Ray Lakes Loop in the Sierras. And the three of us women were sitting down having our lunch with our backs resting against a log. Bruce was down at the stream filtering water for all of us, community service, and while we were relaxing up there, come toward us was the largest snake any of us had ever seen in length and girth. And I will never forget Janet's voice. I'm surprised they did not hear it at the ranger station about 6 miles down the trailhead, but Bruce heard it. And he dropped his little, filtering device and came running up the trail. I'm pretty sure he thought there's some enormous danger he was going to save us from. And then when he gets up there, he takes this completely unbothered look at the snake. And he goes, that's a pretty big western diamondback rattlesnake. Cool. And then when we gently, or maybe not so gently, reminded him, we did not summon him for identification purposes. We summoned him for removal purposes. He calmly, he gently ushered the beast away. Well, what if it comes back? We asked. And he says, we are in its home, not the other way around. I think that incident says so much about what it was like to be with Bruce in the outdoors. One of the first things I remember noticing backpacking with Bruce and hiking with him was his pack. His pack was like Hermione Granger's magical purse in Harry Potter. If you needed something, he could put his hand in that pack and probably pull it out. You needed a Band-Aid? Here you go. You needed an extra lighter? Here you go. Oh, you need some more water? Here you go. You need a splint for that broken bone? Here you go. I understand that Bruce and Janet had an agreement that if Janet was going to go backpacking, Bruce would carry her stuff. Well, not all of her stuff, but at least the stuff that they shared. There was in that pack, there was an alcohol stove that Bruce had engineered an aluminum windscreen that used some sort of physics to actually make it work. You see, there's only 12 backpackers in the entire United States that can actually get alcohol stoves to work, and Bruce was one of them. Or there was a fancy tube and fiber tent that took an engineering degree to put up because it only used hiking poles. And he made it look easy. And that thing was palatial. It weighed half of what my little tiny coffin-like one-person backpacking tent weighed. And it was 16 times as big. And it was the same tent, if I remember the story correctly, where Janet wakes up in the middle of the night and tells Bruce, I think there's a skunk outside our tent because I see the silhouette. And Bruce says calmly, because he was always calm, he said, no, that's inside the tent. It was a roomy tent, for sure. I can personally attest that sometimes the things that Bruce pulled out of that pack were magical. I somehow persuaded Bruce and Janet to join me in the middle section of my through hike of the John Muir Trail. We actually saw a picture of a couple places there. The John Muir Trail is the longest trail in the contiguous U.S. a wilderness trail that doesn't cross a road. So there's 200 miles of it. It doesn't cross a road. So Bruce and Janet are going to meet me in the middle of this trail. And in order to do that, they have to drive miles and miles and miles and miles of unmarked dirt roads and take a boat shuttle across some lake and find some obscure trail junction in the middle of nowhere to meet somebody right on time. I'm telling you that handling logistics like that was a gift that he had. And of course they were on time. Actually, they were early, of course. And when I met them, Bruce, with that Cheshire cat grin on his face, says, brought you something. And he pulls out of that pack a white grocery sack. Said, yeah, we brought you frozen ice cream bars. What? How? This is in the middle of the wilderness, miles and miles from any road. We're not talking freeze-dried. We're not talking dehydrated. We're talking frozen ice cream bars. Bruce! Dry scientific magic? I don't know what it was. But we all sat there on the ground and ate the entire box of the most delicious ice cream sandwiches in the universe. That was not the first time. I mean, that was the first time, but it wasn't the last time I saw them do something like that. The last time I adventured with Bruce and Janet was above Ivey, Colorado, a couple years ago, when we spent a night in one of the 4 rustic mountain huts on the Snuffles Traverse. They were supposed to backpack that whole trail with us, join us in all the huts. But a short hike at Silverton, Colorado, a day or so before, had proven that the altitude or something was going to be a challenge. And so they joined us on the only hut you could kind of drive to. Well, Bruce never complained about missing the rest of that hike. In all my miles together, I never heard Bruce complain. He was still the one that night who lit the finicky propane lanterns. He was still the one who started the fire in the stove, probably with one match there. And that evening, we all sat down together on the rustic floor of that cabin and played whatever silly games they had stored there. Bruce and Janet were always the best and easiest of company. They surprised us a couple days later by actually hiking up the trail from the exit and meeting Elaine and I as we finished the trail. And in that backpack that he carried, which was actually a little bit smaller now, there were no frozen ice cream bars, but there were pastries that he brought. And there was the same delight at being on the trail then as there was from the very first outdoor adventure that I had with Bruce snowshoeing on Carson Pass. Bruce took what he was given, and he made the most of the time. That was Bruce. I know that so many of us are grateful to have shared outdoor adventures with Bruce. In the outdoors, he so loved, and he helped us to love. And I know that there will be more. There'll be more flowers, more trees, maybe more snakes, more magical miles. I know that I look forward to adventuring with Bruce again.
One ordinary Sabbath, about 10 or 15 years ago, Bruce Ivey exploded the universe. At least he exploded mine. That morning, Bruce showed Choir Room Sabbath School the deep field image from Hubble. It shows thousands of galaxies. This photograph is famous now, but at the time I had never seen it or even heard of it. And at that moment, my universe expanded from, I have to admit, barely post-Copernican, to a place where our Milky Way is merely one galaxy among uncountable billions. Thank you, Bruce. I also want to thank Bruce and Janet for the many group hikes they led to places I would never have seen without them. I'm especially grateful for a walk in July 2022 along the Sonoma Coast Trail. We were sauntering happily along, looking at the wildflowers and the gradually lifting fog, when Bruce suddenly announced that we were about to see something unusual. Unusual indeed. He led us to these grooming stones for prehistoric megafauna. Huge boulders where mammoths and their friends had rubbed the stones smooth by scratching themselves. It's up about, this high. I know it wasn't people, right? My world was more interesting because of Bruce. Here are some more memories from students, friends, colleagues, and family. Bruce was truly one of the great people in my life. Easy to talk to, good sense of humor, energetic, wise and calm when challenges arose. He had common sense to go with an excellent intellect. Before I really interacted with Mr. Ivey, I found him a bit intimidating. However, after getting better acquainted with him, I realized that he was a super fun and happy guy. Thanks to him for being a person who brightened my day, and also for opening up his house to the Math and Physics Club. Bruce was such an incredible part of my love for all sciences. I still can't forget our biology, chemistry, and physics labs. I loved every moment of his classes, and Friday evenings at their house were the best. Uncle Bruce was an awesome person. I always admired his cheerful attitude and seemingly unending energy. Bruce's laugh was sudden and explosive, at times surprising his students. Bruce demonstrated high ideals, integrity, and right purpose for living a true moral life. We are all better for having known him. I will never forget how kind and helpful Bruce was to me when I was at Montana State. He made a huge positive difference in my life as a grad student. Memories of the wonderful Sabbath afternoon hikes and warm Christmas celebrations at his house are indelibly imprinted on our souls. Bruce brought such a beautiful combination of wisdom and wit to all he did. Mr. Ivey cared for and enjoyed his students. He was a wonderful science and math teacher, and I really enjoyed all the classes I took from him. He was a kind and caring man and will be missed. I count it as a privilege that we were colleagues for 23 years of active teaching. I always appreciated his even-keeled reasoning and logic applied to all sorts of collegiate issues. He always made sense and wasn't out there at some extreme or another. He could disagree and still make you feel respected, modeling what we need today more than ever. Both of us have many treasured memories of how Bruce impacted our academy years at Mount Ellis. From backpacking adventures to science classes, to an airplane ride, to seeing him walk to class from his house. I have loved Bruce's good common sense and no drama approach to adventures. I am so glad he taught Intro to Physics. This was the one class I did not want to take. However, he taught it so well and I learned so much that my attitude changed. He was by far the best professor I had in college. What I most respect and remember about Bruce are the virtues that he lived and related to others. Respect, responsibility, diligence, gratitude, honesty, generosity, perseverance, courage, faithfulness, compassion, openness to inquiry, and humility. I have several good memories of Uncle Bruce, especially his love of hats. I'll most fondly remember Bruce for the hikes and the Sabbath school class, where his cheerful and anything but naive generosity and spirituality shone through. Bruce was such a wonderful human being, upbeat, witty, compassionate, smart, reliable, and loving. Bruce was a friend, a colleague, and a mentor, but above all, he was a brother in Christ.
Thank you all. It is joyful to hear these stories, to see an insight that we don't always see from what you have shared with us today. So thank you for that. I'm Nate Furness. I'm one of the pastors here. I got to know Bruce not on a hiking trail, but in his living room. I got to know him after he was diagnosed, and we just spent some time together about once a week. And he was someone who I learned to admire and love. And by the way, we became fast friends. He always had something positive to say. He always had something good to say. He always had something to say about worship that was uplifting. And pastors are also vulnerable people too. And so I would come into his home and he would say something positive about the worship service, the sermon, or some insight, something he was learning, something that he appreciated. I felt safe when I was with him. When I'm hearing the stories from you, you felt the same way too. It is really nice to have people in our lives that provide space, that people can exist with them and be safe with them. It's the text that we are reading today. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. In my Father's house are many dwelling places. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? We know this passage well. For those of us who have studied in the choir Sabbath school, those of us who have gone through our school system, we know this passage well. We know that one of the ministries of Jesus was providing space for people to be. So when he envisions the kingdom of heaven, he doesn't envision it as individual homes that we can all hide in. He envisions it as a place where we can be together. A place where there are many rooms in God's house. And I believe that Bruce was a disciple of Jesus because he provided space here on this earth for people to be together. See, this is what we do in this world when we follow Jesus. When Jesus provides space for us, we respond by providing space for one another. And he's done that. We heard that in his work life. He provided space. And we heard that with the students, from the quotes of the students. We've heard that from each one of us, from the snake on the road or the skunk in the tent. I would have loved to have known him on those hiking trails. He provided space. Bruce lived a generous life. When I started visiting Bruce, I didn't realize that our encounters would turn into a friendship. As a pastor of a church, we visit many people, we go many places, and we do try to find common ground, things that we find in common, things that we love together. But I look forward every Thursday to going to visit Bruce for an hour. And when I had to leave early, I was disappointed because one day I had to go visit the president. I almost didn't go because Bruce and I were having so much fun. It was Janet who came in and said, "It's time for you to go. You have an appointment." They shepherded me to my duties that I was supposed to be. I love the idea that he blew your mind with astronomy. I can't imagine how you cheat in astronomy, though. Are you not allowed to look up during the test? I'm not sure how this all works. Astronomy to me is looking up, but sometimes we have to look down, I guess. But I love the fact that he participated in so many things to expand not just our view, but our world view as well, our kingdom view. When he shows that to a Sabbath school class, he's wanting to expand our vision of who our Creator is, what is possible. So when we read this passage, I go to prepare a place for you. I believe that Bruce lived that life here on earth. That he had place for you and for me. This is why we are here. When you tell those stories, I never went on a hike with him. He did tell me to go on a couple hikes. I Jeff have become more of a comfort inn hiker. He told me I should go down to Pope Valley, and there's a trail that I can take, and it has, I think he said, 8 water crossings. I didn't know that was significant. But now, every crossing I will make over water on a trail, I will think of Bruce. In my response to Jesus, in my response to seeing him being a follower of Jesus, I will hope that I can provide space, that I'm never too far ahead of people on the trail, that I am including people in the things that I do, that I am encouraging. And so finally, in 1 Thessalonians 5:11, he speaks about what is to come next. But in particular, what are we to do now? Therefore, encourage one another and build each other up, as indeed you already are doing, as we have seen with Bruce, who encouraged us, who we look forward to meeting with and seeing and walking with, who we worked with, who he taught us. I believe that we will see Bruce again, and there will be a hike, and that we will walk together. Until then, let us walk together now. Amen.
Shall we bow our heads? Dear God, we've lost a dear friend. We want to thank you for the years you've given us with this dear friend. The people he's touched, the lives he's touched in his life and his teachings. We want to thank you for the logical mind of Bruce, the talent you gave him, of breaking things down so that he could share them with the rest of us, so we could understand what Bruce understood and what you created. We want to thank you for his adventurous spirit, Lord. He got us out to places that without Bruce, we would have never went there. We also want to thank you for the humor that always left us assured that everything was okay in a time that we thought we might have been in trouble. We pray for your healing hands upon Janet's heart. And last of all, we want to celebrate your love and salvation with the assurance that we'll meet Bruce again and do all these things again. Your name. Amen.